All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of New Brunswick's program year 2023 annual action plan hearing. The city gets an annual allocation from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, so we're what's called an entitlement community under those guidelines. So annually we get an allocation for two programs, CDBG and Home. We are then required to produce an annual action plan with our intentions and plans for how we intend to spend those dollars. And one of the requirements is to have a hearing on that plan. This is that hearing prior to council action and submission to the federal government for authorization and approval. So. I'll jump into the summary. This is the fourth year of the 2023 year is year 4 out of 5 from our 2020 consolidated plan, which is a 5-year plan, and you do annual plans based off of that consolidated plan. The projected programs for this year are as follows: neighborhood security, funded to $160,000. This provides additional police presence in neighborhoods, support for crime watch groups, youth programs for DARE, gang prevention, and anti-drug stuff. It's a program that the city's run, I think, since we got CDBG back in the 70s. I think it's been funded at the same rate since then as well. $144,000 for code enforcement, primarily for payment for to cover the cost of providing 3-year inspections for rental units in the city. $200,000 for pedestrian cycling and traffic safety. Okay, the fire truck stuff is a typo there. This is for buying, just sort of anything in that regard. We're typically going to be looking to do either bump outs, bike racks, daylighting, things to improve safety at city intersections to the best of our ability, perhaps additional bike lanes, bike parking, visibility. So then for fair housing, $15,000, which goes to Puerto Rican Action. Well, it doesn't have to go to the Puerto Rican Action Board. They're the only people who ever bid on the project. It's for fair housing counseling, which is an obligation that the city has under our CDBG allocation to provide fair housing counseling, and Pratt is the public service agency that has done it for the city since as far back as I can remember. $60,000 for business assistance. It's been provided through the Union County Economic Development Corporation since 2018, I believe. And the $60,000, it may or may not be for them, depending on who bids or their interest, etc. But it's to support small businesses in the city of New Brunswick and getting access to other grants or special loan products or just business training in general. Set aside of $105,000 for capital improvements for city parks as needed, primarily hopefully targeting playground equipment. $164,199 for planning and administration. The $199 because that was sort of what was kind of hanging off from the back of the allocation, and it allowed us to use everything else as a round number. Jumping over to Home, $45,000 for administration of the Home program. Home, for context sake, is a program that is funded for the purposes of advancing affordable housing. There's a couple of different ways you can do it through Home. You can either subsidize the building of affordable housing. There's tenant-based rental assistance as an option, and which functions kind of similar to a project-based voucher. And there's also rehabilitation of properties for affordable housing. There's a CHOTO set aside of $94,341. One of the requirements of Home is that 15% of the allocation is set aside for CHOTOs, which are community housing development organizations to build affordable housing. It's a requirement. It's typically challenging for most cities. There's not a lot of chodos. It's a very difficult thing to qualify as a chodo, and so it's money that often just kind of gets banked and hard to utilize, but it's a requirement to set it aside, those 15%. And then 489, 594 for affordable housing for projects to be determined. We don't have a project to put that into. Once the city's allocation is approved by the federal government, we would then be able to take applications and see where we could plug that money in, and then we'd come back and do an amendment to the plan to point the money at whatever project or projects are deemed appropriate for that subsidy. And so that's the overview of our plan for July 23 through June 24. And so now I open it up to the public comment. Yeah. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Dominguez. Charlie Cradaville, New Brunswick Today. Appreciate the summary. I did think that the fire truck stuff was a bit of a stretch. So you're telling me that's doesn't belong there.
We actually just bought a fire truck.
That's what I thought.
Probably lagging from, that was last year. So that's
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did want to speak to the pedestrian cycling and traffic safety issue. Obviously, we can do a lot with that here in New Brunswick, and I know the prior planning director did some work to get the first ever bike lanes in the city, and got one on my street, on my block, but you can barely tell because it's
kind of faded out.
All faded out, and even if it was clearly marked, it's not getting a lot of use because you're risking getting hit with a door from any of the parked cars. You're basically sandwiched in between a line of parked cars and a lane of traffic on a busy street. So we don't see a lot of folks using that bike lane. And indeed, there's definitely not great infrastructure for cyclists. So I would just say that, if you've got 200K set aside, I'd be curious to know, how many blocks or how many miles of protected bike lane that could get us, because I think that's the key, is we don't have any protected bike lanes outside of College
Well,
Ave.
that depends on, how far the money stretches, obviously. I don't know what the cost of a protected bike lane is. So that's dependent on a lot of things. But I also, as much as I do love to cycle, not as much as Glenn did, but I'm a big fan, and I like biking into work and everything too.
Right.
That said, I do want to try to I have that as an option, but I do want to try to prioritize other forms of infrastructure that could do more tangible safety improvements. I'm not against using it for bike lanes. I'm exploring areas in the city where they might be good fits, new ones, if we can, and replacing the old ones that are in suboptimal condition. But so, for example, maybe a meeting or two ago, we authorized the purchase for a bunch of bike racks that we're using to daylight intersections in the 6th Ward once they come in. So we're trying them around College Ave, not to replace the delineators, but in lieu of, I don't know if I explained it at the meeting, but they're basically like delineators you can park a bike at. They have utility. They're better than bollards. And we do have a problem with people parking on top of crosswalks and too near of stop signs, which state law doesn't allow. And so one of the big things is improving visibility and daylighting, especially over there in the 6th Ward, where I think it's really problematic. South of the hospital and on the College Avenue side, at night, sometimes it's very difficult to view whether you're driving, biking, or walking. It's not ideal. So I want to improve sort of on those fronts of safety first. I'm not writing off the bike lanes, because that may be where some of the money goes. But this is sort of a holistic angle. And so we're starting over there with that batch from either last year or the year before's money, and this one we're going to be exploring other parts of the city for deployment of these funds.
Okay. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I certainly
Also, as an add-on,
Go ahead.
and I'm not trying to cut you off, going up to Remsen. I feel like, what would that be, north of you? Right, I guess that's north, right, on the other side, like toward Unity Square?
Yeah,
I think from like, if you call from like Livingston to Remsen, I see cyclists there. I do see them all pretty much, they do seem to get off at Remsen though. So your point is not invalid or anything.
No, yeah, thanks for sharing. And I know they redid the intersection at Livingston, and so some of the markings are back as a result of that. But yeah, really do support bump outs. I think that's a good thing to spend some of the money on. But I do think, protected bike lanes will be much more effective than the existing, status quo. And yeah, I've seen other cities, they use things like Jersey barriers
Right.
to be the
It's
protection.
it's one factoring in cost. I'm not saying that that's an insurmountable cost. It's just one is paint, and
Yep.
paint costs X.
Yeah.
And barriers cost more than X.
Right.
So that's just figuring that out. But then also there's a consideration for space and how much
Right.
you can eat into the space and have a compliant road, and especially on Sedan, which is problematic, because of the emergency route. So I don't know what the road measurements there are, but I'll speak to Director Valenti and see what can be done over there and other sites.
Yeah.
For improved safety.
Yeah, and I do think, there's bigger picture things that can be done in terms of taking 2-lane roads and making them 1 lane, so that you've got enough room to have a comfortable, protected bike lane without taking away parking.
We don't have many 2-lane roads. If you mean 2 lanes in each direction?
Oh, no, I mean 2-way, I should say.
Okay, because I was
Yeah.
gonna say, I think we have almost none that are city roads, or there's just not many period in the city, even if they're county roads.
Right.
Our arterials are all pretty much 1-lane roads, except for maybe like 27. But yeah, you mean like converting 2
I
lanes
meant
into 1 lanes.
two-way, apologies, yeah.
Gotcha.
I think some 2-way streets could become 1-way streets, and then you've got, a full lane to work with to make it more pedestrian friendly, cyclist friendly, et cetera. But yeah, I'll move on, because the other
Sure.
big issue is the housing crisis, and so I'm glad to see some of the dollars set aside for affordable housing. I'm curious, though, what's happened with the prior allocation. So I know, for instance, in my neighborhood, Remsen and
They just haven't been deployed. So, as an FYI, we have these projects in the pipeline, right? We're talking Sterling side, 45 Remsen, Hildebrand Commons now.
Yes.
Former Hoffman Pavilion. They pretty much all suffered a kind of awkward double whammy here, where COVID came and then you had a spike in construction materials.
cost of.
Yes. And then those came down. But then now the cost of borrowing for construction loans has gone up, which has kind of screwed a lot of things for them. The other issue is that there's a cap on home dollars on how much you can subsidize per unit. It's not infinite. So you can't give a project $1 million to build 1 unit. I forget offhand what the rate is. We, in a high cost area, have a multiplier, I think of 2.5 times of what the normal rate is. And I think, so example, and I might be off by tens of thousands of dollars, but functionally I'm in the ballpark. If you were to build a 3-bedroom affordable unit, home would allow you to subsidize it to ballpark about $300,000. And so that might not be enough in today's market. So it's really a matter of, does HUD adjust their calculation on that front and create some leeway? Because otherwise it's hard to squeeze these in. So the projects are still sort of moving forward, but they're looking for additional subsidies. I know the state's rolling out sort of additional subsidy programs for affordable housing. There's some more low-income housing tax credit stuff happening. And they're all kind of working diligently to snag as much of that as they can to pencil out the last gaps that they have in their budgets. But yeah, as far as I know, they're all moving forward. It's just not as fast as we'd like to see.
Okay, yeah, I did want to follow up on the 45 Remsen one, because I know that's in my neighborhood, and it's something that the church that was there burned down over a decade ago, and it's just been a vacant site that's, you know, often full of garbage, and I know, I guess it's CAPC and JCC that wants to develop there, and, you know, it's been, are they a Chodo, is that?
No.
No, okay,
No,
they're just
no.
a, you know, nonprofit trying to build, and, yeah, nothing to show for it yet, so I did want to bring that up, and I appreciate you explaining
Yeah.
the cause of some of the delays. Just to clarify your approximate, you know, math there, was that including the multiplier,
That is with the multiplier.
the whole city
So
gets
if
the
you live in
multiplier?
a low-cost area in the country, you can go up to like only like 100 grand or something for the unit subsidy. So we get this multiplier and maybe some extra allowance for elevator buildings if they have elevators, but it's really not a ton for a market like ours. It really doesn't move the needle significantly.
Yeah, I mean, I see, even if,
I think the typical unit now, affordable units tend to cost a little bit more to build than market rate units for whatever reason, and I think the typical market rate unit is going for 400,000 or 500,000 per door, so I think 500,000 per unit for an affordable unit is probably about middle of the road for the cost to produce.
okay, well, that's, yeah.
The general idea with the home dollars is what we've been doing for a while. What we try to do is find a project that has several units, you know, more than one or two, and maybe something like on the order of, like, say, Sterling side has 53 units, and we subsidize X number of units in the building with the home dollars. They have subsidies for other things for their project in general. This is a gap funding that sort of plugs the project together, and so functionally, you know, you're credited for home purposes with maybe like a half dozen units, but you've made reality like 50. So that's usually what we try to do with these dollars, because otherwise it's not really the most efficient way to spend, you know,
Sure,
500
sure.
grand at a pop. You know, it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
understood. Well, yeah, it's, you know, unfortunate it costs so much, but,
Yeah, no,
you know, I appreciate that the bulk of the home dollars are going towards affordable housing, so
Yeah.
I hope that those projects will move, and if there's any roadblocks that can be removed, that they get removed quickly so that, you know, they can move forward, whoever the developer is, because we really need the housing, as you know, and in particular, I think we need housing for folks who have no home at all right now, you know, I hope that projects like that can be prioritized, because, you know, it's rough out there. So that's all. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. All right. Seeing no other public, I will close the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for coming.